Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here. I hope you're happy, healthy and well. It's time for a new book review today where I share some life lessons out of books that I have been reading. Now, if you haven't come to this YouTube channel before, welcome. I'd like to actually go through just some very quick notes about this YouTube channel, just in case you think, why is she giving spoilers? Now, this YouTube channel is called Life Lessons from Books, and I read books. Whenever I read a book, I extract some own life lessons, some themes, some perspectives that I have never thought about, and then I apply them in my own life and try and make sense of them, and then I share them here. If this is not of interest to you, then that is totally okay. What I do recommend, though, is to read the book and then come back to this video and then share your own life lessons and your comments and your own themes and your own experiences about the book in the comments below. I read all the comments and I comment on the majority of them, and I don't use AI. So what you see is what you get on this channel. It is me behind the comments and behind everything here. Now, what I want to talk about today is Lionel Shriver's new book called Mania. The byline here is, what if calling someone stupid was illegal? And that's what really intrigued me with this book. I did read one book in the past by Lionel Shriver, and you could guess the book. It is We Need to Talk About Kevin, and I found that brilliant. But I have not read any other of her books, nor do I know of Lionel Shriver's politics. The only feelings I had is by reading this book that I could extract some meaning about what her perspectives are, simply because I got this feeling that Pearson Converse, who is the protagonist of this book, might be similar in thinking to Lionel Shriver, and that is a big assumption. So we're introduced to Pearson Converse. Now, before I go on to talking, I just want to ask the question to you. You know, whenever you read a book, if you've got some really odd character names, protagonist names, does that throw you off somehow? I found Pearson Converse a bit of a mouth. Some of the names of her children also a bit odd and telling, in fact. The book is about Pearson Converse. She's an academic. She teaches writing at the local university. She has a husband called Wade, who is a tree surgeon, is someone who does his job, is a practical man, and she's got two children who she got through sperm donors, and she selected the sperm donors based on their high IQ. So her oldest son is called Darwin, he's a maths genius. Her second daughter is called Zanzibar, who has creative flair about her, also quite smart young girl. And then her youngest daughter, Lucy, who I feel at times Pearson actually put Lucy down. Lucy felt that way. She was called dumb by her mother. So here we have a family unit who's living in an alternate reality. Now, you could say that this world is based very heavily on today's world, but at a point where political correctness has gone mad, wokeness has gone mad. So Lionel Shriver has drawn a line and just said, this is the world that we are going to if we continue the line we are at. It is illegal to call someone stupid. It is illegal to have to put tests and assessments on children. There are no university accreditations. Qualifications are gone by the wayside. You can't trust anymore the food that you eat because you can't trust that they've gone through the regular standard testing processes. You can't trust that when you go to a doctor, you've got some 12-year-old kid doing surgery on you. So the whole world has gone completely mad. Cannot integrate or say anything that could put anyone else below you in some ways. It is about a world where there is no reference, and the removal of movies like Dumb and Dumber, there are removal of the movies like Sherlock Holmes, and because he's considered smart. Let's just say it is idiocracy gone mad. If you're reading this book, I also highly recommend a movie that was made many years ago called Idiocracy, because it feels sometimes that we are currently in an idiocracy. All the difficulties of the relationships that Pearson has in this book with regards to her being vocal about the changes in society and how difficult it is for her as an academic to do her work because she questions why her students are even in her class. But at the same time, she was also being looked at and scrutinized by the university hierarchy of not towing the party line. This was an interesting concept here about not towing the party line, and I think it was a life lesson that I extracted from this book. But ultimately, this book, as I was reading it, it is really an ode to stupidity. If stupidity has gone to the nth degree, this is what it would look like. However, there were times in this book that I felt that as a reader, maybe the author was trying to tell me something as a reader, as in how complicit have I been in my not expressing my own views about the insanity of language and the insanity of the situation of the world. At times in this book, the way it was written, I felt that I was getting lectured at. And I like to believe that I'm someone who's quite open, and I like to believe that I listen and I empathize with people's situations and their perspectives, and I understand that everyone has a different lens based on the experiences, their backgrounds and their religion. And I like to believe that we are still in a world where we can talk to each other, that we can agree to disagree, and that we can learn from each other and be curious about where we come from and why we think of certain things and why everyone's perspective has value. And at times I felt maybe I was being the problem because I refused to take sides. It's not black or white. One of the life lessons for me was, I thought, what is Lionel Shriver's politics? I must admit, I did a bit of a Google search just to try and see what her politics are. And mistakenly, and I give myself a slap on the hand for this, is I thought to myself, well, is she left or is she right? And I thought, I shouldn't be thinking this way. And I hate myself for thinking that way, because now I find that society is forcing you to think that way. Lionel Shriver's character, Pearson Converse, was getting us to really think about our own perspectives on people who think differently to us, and also how involved have we been in getting this situation of this political correctness in the world. How complicit are we on this? Ultimately, I believe she was just trying to get us to think what life could be like if it goes to extremes, and it could go one extreme or the other extreme. And there's a part in this book where it flips, and you'll just actually see what results. So a life lesson for me was not putting in the bucket this black and white thinking, left or right or wrong, black or white. There is murkiness in the middle, and I think that's the challenge for us today, is to be able to understand that murkiness and then come out of it better. A second life lesson for me was, at times, character Pearson Converse here would come across as a holier than thou person. She was very intellectual, even though she would call herself not smart. She would say that she wasn't an intellectual, and yet the way she was written was very intellectual. Lionel Shriver used long words, big words. She debated and argued intellectually with others that made the others feel as if they were inferior. And this was a point in the book where I started to feel inferior as a reader. And I thought, oh my God, is the author trying to tell me something? That she's of a certain state of education, of intellectualism, and I'm down here. Initially, I thought, well, maybe that's not the case. Maybe she's just really forcing us to think of our own actions. But the way it came across was lecturing. Having said that, I don't take things to heart, really. And I'm okay. I mean, she wrote the book and she's presented a book that makes you think. I would say this book would be a very good book club book, because it would get people talking, and whether they agree with them or not. There was some part of the book where it started to become more non-fiction like, and it started to become more like a description of what is currently happening in American politics today. So it lost me in that part, because it lost from the storyline. Felt like it had become a bit of a rant. But ultimately, I felt that it made us think about what the world is like when you allow different factions to determine their thoughts on society at large, to tell people how they should be thinking, to tell people what they should be saying, to pit people against each other. Also, the difficult nature of relationships in a world where we all have different perspectives. And her youngest daughter was indoctrinated into a system that didn't have testing, that didn't allow for very strong language where others can call her dumb or stupid. And she could tell on the authorities, and the authorities could come down on people like a ton of bricks. The family relationships in this book became quite tense, where they had to be quiet around their younger daughter for fear of being dobbed into the authorities. And some of the quotes, I'll just tell them here to you now, and you'll understand where I'm coming from. Her young son says to her, "I don't understand the rules anymore." This was interesting because, you know, there are times where just looking at the news nowadays, just looking at the world as it is nowadays, the amount of change that has happened since COVID is astronomical. It's gone crazy. And there have been many times where I have said to myself and said to my husband, I don't understand the world anymore. I don't understand the rules anymore either. There was another one where her husband says to her, you know, just follow the crowd, avoid the language, roll with it. Just roll with it. And this concept of just going with the flow. And at times I felt that as a life lesson here, this was very interesting because you're seeing a lot of change that is happening outside your little world. What do? Do you fight it? Do you stand up against it? Do you roll with it? Do you agree with it? Do you not agree with it? How are you as a person? How do you face this new world as a person? Do you keep quiet about it? Do you not mention it? Do you not mention it for fear of having conflict? So these are typical things that a lot of people are feeling nowadays. There's another quote here that if we erase our slurs, we erase our progress. And that came from Pearson Converse talking about the books in her writing course, saying that if we do erase everything of the past, then we basically erase our progress as human beings. And I actually believe this. The people in this book were thinking, well, you know, if our country is like this, is it time for us to move out, emigrate to somewhere else? And where is it that they could go? Australia was mentioned, Ireland, Canada, New Zealand. But boy, Lionel Shriver had all those countries, in particular Australia, in the firing line. I don't know why. I can hazard to guess why. And I think I could hazard to guess why based on the period that she wrote this book and the time of the politics in the country that I live in. But it was interesting to see her take on how she thought of Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Ireland all being in the firing line. I'd also be interested in her politics around what parts of Europe would be like now. Another quote that I had marked down was when she presented to her students and said, well, what's the point of you even attending classes? What's the point of you attending university, college classes? And that made me think, if you are in the world where there are no standardized testing, what are you working for? What are you doing? Why would you need an accreditation? Why would you need anything to do? What would motivate you to continue to do the creative writing? What would motivate you to do your degree? What would motivate you to do anything anymore? So very pertinent question. She has this relationship with her good friend Emery, and one of the life lesson I would say here was Emery was a very interesting character. If you can picture a social media influencer, someone who has the gift of the gab, someone who is a grey person. And many years ago, I would call people grey, and grey people are those people who don't seem to have an opinion either way. They sit on the fence for a lot of things, and they have the gift of the gab for being able to be on one side one day and then on the other side on the other day, and you never really know where they stand. Emery comes across as a very grey person for me because she has the knack, the media knack of being able to string a sentence together and it sounds so great that you feel that she's on your side. And this gets focusing on the book about Emery's and Pearson's relationship. We've got the two extremes. We've got Pearson, who is quite vocal in her dislike of the current situation and how then it isolates her and isolates her entire family, and she finds it difficult entirely for work, and she loses her family, versus Emery, who has the greyness about her. No one really knows where she stands, and yet she is quite popular and has all the jobs. Very interesting take on it. And I would hazard to guess that there could be many people in our own lives that we know who are the vocal ones and what happens to them in work or in life, versus the ones who are grey, who keep quiet and who you really can't tell where they stand. A very interesting relationship, and I think if you have this book as a book club book, that would be one topic of conversation that would be very interesting. So I think I'm going to leave it here. I had so many notes. Look at this, all these notes in this book. I'll leave it for now because it's getting on to 20 minutes and I need to edit this, and editing takes hours. I'd love to know if you have read this book and what are your thoughts about it and all the different topics around that are mentioned in this book. Let me know what you think. I would recommend this book, but I would also be interested in what you thought about the writing style, because at times I found the writing style a bit too highfalutin for someone who the protagonist was saying what she wasn't smart or she wasn't trying to come across as an intellectual. I think the writing obviously did, and that's why in some way I didn't really connect with the character of Pearson. Even though I understood where she was coming from, I also understood Emery was coming from, where Wade was coming from, where her kids were coming from. Hey, maybe I'm part of the problem because I can see value in everything. I don't like to take sides, and maybe I am also part of the problem. Maybe that is what Lionel Shriver was trying to say in this book. Anyway, thank you for listening and thank you for watching. Bye for now.